Today we're going to be talking about some cards from Riftbound, the upcoming TCG from Riot Games. We're going to be focusing on the Fury domain today, or the red domain. I'm going to make a video about each of the different 6 domains and try to just rate every card on a scale from 1 stars to 5 stars, just giving my preliminary thoughts on which cards I think are really good in the metagame, which cards I think might struggle at least early on before we see some expansions, which ones I think are absolutely busted and will probably be auto includes in basically every deck that has this color or features this domain. And so yeah, it's going to be really fun to get into some of these cards and rate them. Again, this is all just my opinion, so I could be totally wrong. These card reviews are always like hit or miss. I'm coming from Hearthstone. Hearthstone is my big card game that I've played for the past 10 years plus. So I'm rating it with that experience in mind. I'm aware that this game takes elements from a bunch of different card games, especially Magic. No Magic experience whatsoever, so evaluating this will be interesting. I'm kind of looking at this from the lens of, is this type of card good in card games of this kind of card game? And if it generally is, then I'm going to rate it highly. So let's get into it. This domain, the Fury domain, has 31 units, 16 spells, 5 legend cards, and 5 gear cards. Those legends, there's actually 4 legends technically in the origin set, but Proving Grounds has Annie, which is a red legend. So starting with Annie here. Annie is our first champion unit. Of course, there are more than 5 champion units in the set. There are just 5 legends that you can play, and you'd have to just match up your unit with that legend, and that can be your chosen champion. And I'll get into that in a later video probably on how you organize your deck and how you build your deck around certain characters. But for now, we're just talking about the cards. So, Annie. She is a 5 cost, 4 might unit, and she costs an additional 1 fury power to play, which of course means you're paying 5 energy, you're tapping 5 runes, and then you have to recycle 1 of those runes back into your rune deck. Champion unit from Noxus. Her card text reads, your spells and abilities deal 1 additional damage. Each instance of damage they deal is increased by 1. Very simple effect. This is the kind of card that can get much stronger and weaker depending on what other cards are in the set to support it. So within Origins, this is going to heavily depend on what other spells we see that can make use of this effect. Because baseline, she's a pretty weak unit, right? 5 cost for a 4 might unit is pretty expensive for a very underwhelming amount of power. So I'm putting Annie right now at probably a 3-star card. I'm saying she's 3 stars because the spells that I've seen so far in the Origin set are good, but I don't think there's enough support there to really make use of this effect and make her worthwhile playing in your deck when there are better options out there. So 3 stars for Annie. Next up, we've got Blazing Scorcher. This is a 5 cost, 5 might unit, so good stats for the cost, no power required. The card text is, you may pay 1 as an additional cost to have me enter ready, and those symbols basically mean that you have to tap a rune and then recycle a Fury rune. Most of the time, you're going to be tapping a Fury rune and then recycling that same one to get the most efficient turn possible. And this is a strong effect, especially later in the game when you have the runes to burn on that. It means you can immediately attack, which is huge. In card games, you have summon fatigue, where cards usually can't attack the turn they're played. And this is kind of how Riot Games is getting around this, where you can pay an additional rune, basically sacrifice it in order to get a unit out there quickly. So this card is really good on curve if you've got 5 runes, just slamming this on your board and having it be ready next turn. And I think it's even better as you get further along in the game and you can instantly have it ready and instantly have it go out to the battlefields. So I'm going to give this a 4-star card. I think it's really good, and I think it's going to see quite a bit of play. Next up, we have Brazen Buccaneer. This is a Bilgewater Pirate. Again, those are all flavor text, so I'm going to start not saying those just because they're not really relevant in this context. I think they may print cards in the future. We'll have to see, but they may print cards in the future that relate to those like traits that cards have, or those allegiances that cards have. So eventually those might be beneficial or impactful, but for the time being, I'm just going to go based on what the card is and what the actual flavor text is. So a 6 cost, 5 might unit. As you play me, you may discard a card as an additional cost. If you do, reduce my cost by 2. This is a good effect, a 4 cost, 5 might unit is good. Generally speaking, I think if you've got might equal to cost, it's just a fair, like, middle-of-the-road unit. Just a good thing to play. So being able to play a 4-cost one is a lot better, obviously. Now, you have to think about discarding that card. Is that worth it for you, right? There are some decks that will want to discard cards, like the Jinx deck, because they benefit from having fewer cards in hand. And there are some cards that want to be discarded. From what I've seen so far of this set, it's pretty weak. But as more cards get printed, as more sets get released, and you see more discard synergies come into play, I think this card could get much, much better. For the time being, I'm going to put this at a 2-star card. I don't think it's very strong in the current set. We'll have to wait and see what else gets printed. And next we have Brynhir Thundersong. This is a 6-cost, 5-might unit. When you play me, opponents can't play cards this turn. This is a crazy effect. It's essentially a lockout mechanism. The only thing I can compare it to is like Loatheb from Hearthstone, which is a really old card that prevented your opponent from, effectively prevented your opponent from playing spells, and so you couldn't react to it being played. This is very similar. You basically, the vision for this card that I'm seeing is you build a big board, you attack a battlefield, or you prepare to attack a battlefield, and then you slam Brynhir, and your opponent just can't react to whatever you're going to do here. And it basically stops them from playing spells to counter your attack. It's a really big disruption mechanic. And generally speaking, whenever you have disruption printed in a card game, you know people are going to try to play it because it's super fun to have disruption in your deck and to just mess with your opponent, right? So I think Brynhir will see play for sure. Whether or not she's good remains to be seen. It is pretty expensive for a unit that's only 5 might, but she doesn't cost any power. So for the time being, I'm going to say she's a 4-star card. I think she will definitely see play. She'll see play almost certainly in slower decks that really want to build up and go. But maybe she'll see play in aggressive decks where, you know, she's the most expensive card in your deck and you just slam her and go all in towards the end of the game and your opponent can't do anything. I can totally see that working out as well. So 4-star card. Really cool effect. Next up, Captain Farron. Other friendly units here have Assault, +1 might while they're attackers. Oh, and he's a 4-cost, 5-might unit. Very efficient stat line. Keep in mind, though, you do have to pay a power rune. So it's a little bit less desirable because those power runes, like recycling a rune, is pretty significant. But having a 5-might unit on a technically 4-cost body is great. Other units having +1 while they're attackers is a pretty strong effect. This is going to see play in decks that are more about generating a lot of little things and trying to overwhelm the battlefields and trying to swarm your opponent. So I can totally see this seeing play in more aggressive decks. It's going to be a staple in those types of decks, but probably not in the slower ones. I'm going to give this a 3-star. I think it'll definitely see play. Whether or not it's like truly impactful, we'll have to see. Okay, Chemtech Enforcer, 2-cost, 2-might unit. Assault 2, so +2 power while I'm an attacker. When you play me, discard 1. So this is an early game minion. You're going to be playing this hopefully on one of your first couple of turns when you have the runes for it, and hopefully your opponent can't instantly just like react and kill it. It's a strong effect. It comes in exhausted, obviously, but once it attacks, it's 4 might while it's attacking, which is a 2-cost 4, which is great. That's double the stats that you'd expect on a 2-cost body. Keep in mind, though, they have to discard. So once again, similar to Brazen Buccaneer, this card is going to heavily depend on the relevant discard synergies that are available. But I think it's strong enough to play on its own. I think you'll often have a card in your hand that you're willing to sacrifice in order to just get this out on the board early, especially for those aggressive decks. So thinking like Jinx, basically. Decks will probably play this all the time. It's almost not included in those aggressive types. So this will be a 4-star for me for those types of decks. All right, next we've got Dangerous Duo. This is a 3-cost, 3-might unit with Legion. When you play me, give a unit +2 might this turn, and then get the effect if you played another card this turn. That's just explaining what the keyword means. That's what Legion means. The only thing I can compare this to is like, for this effect anyway, is combo. In Hearthstone, there's a mechanic where you play a card, and then the next card you play has an additional effect if you've played a card already this turn. So it's the exact same thing. Giving another unit an extra 2 power is huge, especially if you've played units already on the board, and this turn you're just amplifying what you've already got going on. So you slam this down. Well, sorry, you slam another card, right? Maybe a cheaper card, something that costs 1, or maybe you're playing a 1-cost spell to buff a unit, and then you play this for 3, and you give a unit going to a battlefield an additional 2 might. Very strong. It's basically 5 might on a 3-cost body. You just have to make sure that you're playing it second or third or after another card on your turn. So I think that'll probably be pretty doable. But again, it remains to be seen whether or not hand size becomes a real problem in this game, whether or not there's enough draw effects to make that possible to pull off. So for now, I'm going to give this a 3-star. I think it's solid, but nothing crazy good. All right, another champion unit. This is Darius, Trifarian. 5 cost, 5 might, and you do have to pay a power rune to get Darius into play. When you play your second card in a turn, give me +2 this turn and ready me. So just like we saw previously with the Legion effect, this is a card that almost has reverse Legion, right? You want to play this and then play something else off of it to get the benefits of both. So Darius, you slam your Darius, then you slam your Dangerous Duo. You're giving Darius ready and +2 might, so he's 7, and then Dangerous Duo is giving him another 2 might, so he's actually 9, and he's ready, so he can go straight into a battlefield with 9 might, and all you had to pay was 8 mana or 8 runes, and then take one of those runes and recycle it. And yeah, and you've got a 9 power unit instantly at a battlefield. It's really strong. Darius is better than Dangerous Duo, obviously, because by itself it's still just a 5-cost 5 body, and it just has the additional effect if you do play something else. And oftentimes you'll be playing this when you have something else to add on to it, and you won't just be playing it blank like you might have to do with Dangerous Duo. So for that reason, I'm giving Darius a 5-star. I think Darius is going to be a very viable champion unit in the meta, especially in those aggressive decks that need like a finisher. Darius is definitely going to be a finisher, like endgame unit that really seals away your victory when you just need to squeeze out those last couple of points. All right, next up we've got Draven Showboat. This is a 5-cost 3 might unit. And again, just like Darius, you have to recycle one of those Fury runes in order to play him. And his text reads, "My might is increased by your points." This is an interesting effect. I'm not sure how strong it'll be, if I'm being honest, because a lot of the times you're going to have Draven in your hand early in the game, and he's going to be dead weight. And Draven doesn't really get strong until you're kind of middle of the game already, maybe 4 or 5 points in, when his strength is like 6 or 7, maybe 8, and then you're actually getting true value from having the unit on your board. But until then, he doesn't do much, and I don't think that it's worth playing a conditional unit like that when there are better things to be doing with your time. It's too heavily reliant on already being ahead when you have him in your hand, and oftentimes if you have him in your hand, it'll prevent you from getting ahead because you can't just play a 5-cost 3 might body. It's just horribly inefficient. So for that reason, I think Draven's pretty weak. If this were a 4-cost unit, it might be better, but even then, like, I understand they have to balance this card, and it's super strong if played at the right time. But I just don't think it's strong enough because it's going to be dead weight in your hand a lot of the times. So for that reason, I'm saying Draven is going to be probably a 2-star card. I won't say it's a 1. I don't think it's that bad, but I'm going to say it's 2 stars. All right, Flame Chompers. It's a 3-cost 3 might unit with the text, "When you discard me, you may pay 1 rune to play me." Paying the rune means that you're recycling it, right? So you can just recycle a rune. And that rune can be one that was already exhausted or one that's not. This is, again, one of those discard synergy cards that we talked about. You want to be discarding this with your Brazen Buccaneer or with your, I think it was Chemtech Enforcer that also discarded? Yeah, Chemtech Enforcer, so that you can get this out for cheap. And this is just a 3 might unit that you paid basically 1 rune for, which is great. If they print more of these cards, I can see discard decks and Jinx decks in particular being much stronger. But at least they have thought about this. You can tell the design team has definitely thought about these discard mechanics and are already beginning on putting those into the game. We'll have to see if they get more support in future sets. So final rating, I'm going to say this is 3 stars. I think it's good for what it is and for what it's supposed to be doing, but it's not going to be an auto-include by any means in every deck, especially not the decks that aren't heavily focused on discarding. Okay, next up we have our first epic card. This is, you can see it's like a full art card, and it has the orange jewel at the bottom, meaning it's, a step above the purple rarity. But this is Immortal Phoenix, 3 cost, 3 might, and you pay a rune to play it. This Phoenix has Assault 2, so +2 might when you're attacking, and then when you kill a unit with a spell, you may pay 1 rune to play me from your trash. Really cool effect. Basically, you're playing this guy, he's going to attack with 5 might, and when he dies, he goes into your trash, but then you can resurrect him by paying just 1 rune, and the only thing you have to do to resurrect him is to kill a unit with a spell, which is definitely doable. So I'm putting Immortal Phoenix at a 4-star. I don't think it's meta-defining, but I think it's definitely very strong, and we'll see play. All right, another champion, Jinx. Our 3 cost, 4 might unit. You do have to pay a rune to play her, and she has Accelerate. You may pay 1 rune as an additional cost to have me enter ready, and Assault 2. While I'm attacking, she has 2 strength. So when you play me, discard 2 is what her card text says. So a lot of pros and cons to this card, right? Accelerate as an option is awesome to have, because then you can just pay the extra cost, get a unit out there really quickly. You can have Assault 2 instantly on that unit, so if she's attacking, you can just basically have a 3 cost, 6 might unit out on the board instantly. Sorry, it'd be 4 cost because you're paying the extra rune, so 4 costs immediately for a 6 power, which is still very good. The downside, though, of course, is that when you play her, you have to discard 2 cards. And discarding cards is not always a good thing, as we've discussed. It can be a good thing, but you have to have the support cards in your hand to make it a good thing. She works really well with the Jinx Legend, obviously, because the Jinx Legend wants you to have a small hand size so that you can draw more cards at the start of your turn. So you almost want to let go of your hand, and it kind of makes playing this card worth it with that Legend in play. So I'm going to give this card a 3-star. I think she is definitely viable. I don't think there's enough discard support to make her, extremely strong in the meta. So 3 stars for Jinx. All right, our first big boy. This is Kadregrin the Infernal. This is a 9 cost, 9 might unit with a 2 fury power cost. So again, you have to tap 9 runes, exhaust 9 runes, and then pay 2 of those runes and recycle them back into your rune deck in order to play this guy. He's a dragon from Demacia, and his card text is, when you play me, draw 1 for each of your mighty units. A unit is mighty while it has 5+ might. So this card is a first example of card draw, I think, that we've talked about, and it's a pretty good card draw. This is obviously more suited to a ramp deck. You're thinking more like Volibear-esque Fury deck, because you're playing a big monster, right? You're playing something that you really want to play this on a board that already has a bunch of mighty units on it, and then you just like refill your hand with it. And you really have to build your way up to this too. So I'm curious to see how this fits into the metagame. I hope it eventually does, because myself, I've always been like a control player. I love the control style of play in card games, and this kind of card is right up my alley. It's just a big, massive reward for having established kind of this control over the board, over the battlefield, and being ready to just like march in with your massive army. So I like this card a lot. I don't think it's meta defining, and it's extremely expensive. You only have a max of 12 runes in your rune deck. So 9 is a lot of cost, and then you leave yourself open to having it just be removed next turn, and you only have 3 runes to really work with until you unexhaust everything. Anytime you have expensive cards in this game, you have to keep that in mind, is that you're exhausting those runes, and then most of the time you're only going to have a couple of runes to work with if you want to react to what your opponent does on their turn. So that's kind of the trade-off. So I'd say this is, for even though it's really exciting to me personally, I'd say this is probably more of a 3-star card, but it's really nice, and especially drawing cards in a control deck is going to be very important. So Kadregrin's really cool. Okay, we've got Kaisa, Survivor. She has Accelerate. You may pay 1 as an additional cost to have me enter ready. When I conquer, draw 1. And she is a 4 cost, 4 might unit. Just an all-around solid unit to have in your deck. Kaisa comes out onto the board for only 4. You don't have to pay an extra rune to get her out there. She has the solid middle-of-the-road stat line, and then when she conquers, you draw a card. This is much easier card draw to pull off than Kadregrin was. It's much cheaper, and it's very strong for its cost. And then having Accelerate is really great because you can basically just pay 5, tap an additional rune, recycle it, and now you've got a 5 cost for attack unit that's already on the battlefield, conquering and drawing you a card. Really strong. I think Kaisa's a 4-star card. Okay, Legion Rearguard. 2 cost, 2 might. Has Accelerate. You may pay 1 as an additional cost to have me enter ready. This will be a staple in aggressive decks. You have the benefit of having something very cheap that can also instantly start conquering. So you can play this on turn 1. Both players have 2 runes on turn 1. And if you're going second, you have 3 runes. You can play this and get it to a battlefield immediately. So you can score a point on your first turn with this card if you're going second, which is very strong. Basically helps you get out the gate fast, establish dominance. Paying an additional rune is questionable because you're kind of diminishing your ability to cast things in the future with the mana curve. But I think it's still very strong, and this is a 4-star card. All right, next up we have Magma Wurm. This is an 8 cost, 8 might unit. You have to recycle an additional rune in order to get it out. And the text is, other friendly units enter ready. It will need to stick on the board in order to make use of that. But having a giant unit that basically makes it so that everything you play after it can immediately go and fight and attack is really massive. I think that's very impactful. It's definitely more of a control-y card because it's so expensive. Again, with these expensive cards, you play them, and then you've only got a couple of runes left over to react when your opponent takes their turn. In this case, even if you had full, 12 runes out, you'd have to tap 8 of them and then recycle 1. So then you only have 4 runes left in order to make reactions to your opponent's plays. So because of that, and because I think the early metagames are pretty quick in these early tournaments that are happening right now, I think this card isn't extremely strong right now. It may eventually see play if control becomes more of the meta, if it becomes more possible to, get these guys out and keep them there. But for the time being, I think this is a pretty weak card, all in all. So I'm going to give it a 2-star rating, and hope to myself that it gets better. Noxus Hopeful, a 4 cost, 4 might. It has Legion, I cost 2 less, and you get this effect if you played another card this turn. This is, I think, very similar to what this card looked like in Legends of Runeterra, I believe. I think it was cheaper if you got it out early. I'm going to confirm that. But this card is good. It helps to swarm the board, and if you've got a couple of different units that you want to play on a single turn, you can make this one of them, and it's going to be very cheap cost for a really good body. So 2 cost energy for 4 bodies, no joke. So I think this is really strong. Again, those aggressive decks are seeming more and more the meta right now. So I think this will be really good in most red decks. I'm going to give this a 4-star. Very solid. All right, Noxus Saboteur. Your opponent's hidden cards can't be revealed here. This is a 3 cost, 3 might unit. Really interesting design. Hidden cards are in some colors. I think there may be a red hidden card. I can't think of it right now, but there might be one. I know there are some that are green, and there are probably some that are blue as well. This is definitely just a card that they're making as a precautionary preventative measure, right? They don't want hidden cards to get too strong, and so this is a really good counter to those strategies if they start to get really, really good. Hearthstone has done this thing too, where they have a mechanic that becomes really unfun to play against, and then in their next set they print a card that just invalidates just that and nothing else, and then standalone that card's pretty bad. This is, I think, this is kind of doing it ahead of time. It just already exists at the launch of the game. And 3 might for 3 cost is not bad for an early game unit. So I think this is really good with a good upside. Just standard good stats. Going to give this a 4-star. Pouty Poro. This is a 2 cost, 2 might. And it has Deflect. Opponents must pay a single rune to choose me with a spell or ability. And then keep in mind, it's rainbow, so it can be any color rune, but your opponents have to recycle that rune. So it's the equivalent of them playing a power in order to just choose this with a spell or ability. Deflect, I think, is a very strong effect, and you're going to see this more on some of the other cards that we look at over the course of this series, but I think Deflect is one of the better keywords in the game. Having Deflect on a 2-might body is pretty impactful. I think this will be really good in aggressive decks. I think it'll find its place in basically any deck that wants to empty hand, draw cards quick, play those cards immediately, and really just like put a presence on the battlefields really quickly. So this is a 4-star card in my book. I think it's really strong. Raging Firebrand, a 6-mana, 4-might unit, and you have to pay an additional 1 rune to play it. When you play me, the next spell you play this turn costs 5 less. This, I think, is bonkers. Anytime you have mana cheat in a card game, or in this case, rune or resource cheat, it's almost always a strong card in some way, because it helps you to do things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. You can almost look at this card and evaluate it as like a 1-cost 4-might body that lets you then play a spell from your hand as well that costs 5. So playing spells for cheap is really, really good. This card allows you to do things that you might not be able to do otherwise. You know, if you have a 5-mana spell in your hand and you want to play some might onto the board as well, you play this guy and you play your 5-mana spell, and now you've gotten 4 might on the board, and you've played a 5-unit spell, and instead of paying the 11 runes for it, you're only paying 6. So I think this card is really good, and again, it'll only get better with future cards, future sets printed that have expensive spells in them. But it could get worse if you don't see any of those spells, you know, if a lot of cheap stuff is printed. So really cool effect, really unique. Love this card. I think it's a 5-star card. It might not be meta defining, but I think it has very high potential to be very strong in the future. All right, Raging Soul, 4-cost, 4 might. If you've discarded a card this turn, I have Assault and Ganking, which is +1 while I'm attacking, and I can move from battlefield to battlefield. Ganking is really strong as a keyword too, because it eliminates the need for you to move your units from a battlefield back to your base, and then from that base to the other battlefield in your next turn. So essentially cuts in half the amount of time that you can get to the other battlefield by just going straight there. This relies on discard synergies, so otherwise it's just a normal 4-cost 4 body, which is really good, by the way. And then if you're able to trigger this effect, having an extra might with ganking, it is stupendous. 4-cost for 5 might is really, really good. And with the ganking tag as well, just being able to switch sides and make a presence wherever you need it, it's very flexible. I think this is a 4-star card, very strong in those discard decks. Okay, Scrapyard Champion. 5-cost, 5 might. It does cost a power to play. And it has Legion. When you play me, discard 2, and then draw 2. So you play another card, and then you play this guy for 5 might on board, and then you discard 2 cards, probably 2 cards that you just like don't need anymore or aren't willing to play. Don't think you're going to play anytime soon, and you just want to refill your hand. You just draw 2 new ones. This is really solid. I think a lot of those quick aggressive decks are going to find themselves, hand size and the hand that you have is always the challenge in those discard decks, because you end up getting stuck with a hand that you can't actually make use of in the mid game. And this card kind of solves that problem, where you can get rid of the things that you don't really need right now and look for the things that you do. So really good card. Definitely going to be played in any kind of discard strategy. I'm giving this a 5-star. I think it's really, really solid. All right. I love this artwork. Tibbers. This is Annie's signature unit. When you play me, deal 3 to all units at battlefields, and it costs 8 for 7 might. Now, again, this is a very expensive cost. 8 with an additional 2 rune cost. You have to recycle 2 runes. Granted, those can be purple or red, but you do have to get rid of them and put them back. And then you get a 7-power unit. Obviously, the stat line isn't great for the cost, but the effect is insane, because dealing 3 to all units at battlefields almost wins you the game in some matchups. If you're playing against a Victor deck or another red deck that relies on having tokens out or a large number of individual units out there, you're playing Annie, you slam Tibbers on your 8-mana turn. Who cares if you burn the 2 runes, because you just cleared all the battlefields. And all of a sudden your opponent has invested all these resources into filling those battlefields and getting an early lead, and now all their stuff is dead. Obviously, there are reactions and things that can stop this, or help them to buff up their units so they don't die, but then you're draining more resources from your opponent. So, board clear, really fantastic. Origins being the first set in this card game means that you're going to not have that much of any individual thing in the game right now. So, that goes for board clear, and you're not going to have tons of board clear effects that are printed when the set launches. So, having board clear on top of a giant minion, so you get might and then you also get rid of your opponent's stuff, fantastic. I think Tibbers is a 5-star card. I think it will definitely see play, or at least experimentation, in decks that have Annie and that want to kind of go more towards that mid-range style instead of aggressive. And I like that Riot Games is allowing us to do more things than just aggressive, like fast-paced decks within the Fury domain. So very, very cool. 5 stars. Next up, Tryndamere. 7 cost, 8 might, paying 2 runes to play him. So kind of the opposite of Tibbers, where you had 7 might for 8 cost. Tryndamere is a little bit cheaper. When I conquer after an attack, if you assign 5 or more excess damage to enemy units, you score 1 point. This is really, really cool. So again, Tryndamere has this, I forget what they called, Fury maybe in Legends of Runeterra, or like Overkill almost. Like if you do more damage than you need to, you get a benefit. And he has 8 power. So you want to play this guy on a battlefield that has like a 3 might unit there, and then he bumps into that thing, destroys it, and then you deal the excess, and you score an instant point. You know, you're 1/8 closer to victory, which is massive. Obviously fits in with the kind of slower control decks. He goes well with those might units that we've seen before, because you really want to just slam this guy down on a board with lots of big things, send him to a battlefield, and do a lot of extra damage, like way more damage than you need to in order to get points. I know I've been seeing this card's praises so far, but I think that with what we've seen so far in the sets, he's not incredibly viable, because it's going to be pretty difficult to get 5 excess damage to enemy units in a battlefield. Most of the time, you're going to be pretty even, and maybe you've gotten 2 or 3 points more of might, where you overkilled your opponent's stuff. But getting 5 is going to be hard. So from what I've seen in the sets so far, and from just this card being only 8 might and having to find that 5 excess damage probably elsewhere, I'm going to give this a 2-star. I think Tryndamere is really cool, but not particularly viable, at least not yet. All right, Vayne. 4 cost, 2 power, and you pay a rune as well. She has Assault 3, +3 while I'm attacking. If an opponent controls a battlefield, I enter ready. When I conquer, you may pay 1 to return me to my owner's hand. Really, really interesting design. So very slippery card. Essentially, you play Vayne when your opponent's already on top of a battlefield. You play her, she's ready, and she has 5 power if she wants to go in straight away to that place. So she's starting with a benefit. And then after she's conquered, you can immediately pull her back, which is great because she's obviously a very weak defender. She's only 2 defense at all times. So that ability to conquer and then quickly withdraw and then be played again means that Vayne is more of a response card. She's almost like a spell, but inside of a unit, right? You want your opponent to do something, and you're playing her to quickly take over that battlefield and then pulling her back so that you can just play her again as a reaction to a board state. So really cool design. I'm giving her a 4-star. I think she'll definitely see some play in some decks that want to kind of fight back against those quick, aggressive decks. And yeah, again, really cool card. Okay, Vi. Getting into the arcane characters. We have a 2 cost and 1 rune for a 3 might unit. And she has ganking. I can move from battlefield to battlefield. Recycle 1 from your trash. Give me +1 might this turn. Recycling 1 from your trash is a really cool effect. Maybe you've burned a couple of spells early on in the game, trying to remove your opponent's stuff. Maybe you've lost a couple of your good units to unfortunate, interactions with your opponent. And then you put Vi on the board. She's super cheap. You're able to grab something from your trash and put it into your deck again. Granted, it's at the bottom of your deck, so you do have to cycle all the way down to it. But it's solid. She gets a little bit stronger. It should be a 2-cost 4-might unit then, with ganking, so she can transfer back and forth. Anything that costs this little and has the potential to have 4 might, and also the ability to go back and forth between battlefields, I think is a really strong unit. And so I'm going to give Vi 5 stars. I think she's very solid, can easily be played in mid-range, even some control decks, as just a flex option that you can just throw down and have this kind of flexible fighter that can go back and forth. And then, again, aggressive decks too will want this because you'll be playing your cheap things and playing spells to kind of flood the board, and then you'll want to get those spells back. So I think Vi will see play in a lot of different decks. Really cool card. All right. Now, another big boy. We've got Volibear. He is a 10-cost 9-might unit, and you do have to recycle 2 of those runes in order to play him. And for that massive cost, he's the most expensive thing we've seen so far, you do get a massive benefit. He has Deflect 2. Opponents must pay 2 runes to choose me with a spell or ability. And then when I attack, deal 5 damage split among any number of enemy units here. This is, high cost, high reward card in a nutshell, right? Having Deflect 2 is really impactful because a lot of times your opponents will have runes set aside for interaction with your board, and they'll have held onto their runes so that they can react to what you've played on your turn. In this case, you play Volibear, and now while he's out there, they can't really target him unless they're sacrificing those runes and recycling them. So they have to go back into their rune deck. So they're almost being at a standstill. It's halting their mana curve, their rune curve. If your opponent had 7 or 8, I guess you'd be up to 10. So if your opponent had 10 runes, now they have to go back down to 8 in order to interact with Volibear, which is crazy. And he costs the 2 runes, so in a way, you're kind of offsetting that cost by making your opponent pay it as well. And then having when I attack, deal 5 split among enemy units, that's crazy as well, because your opponent might have some smaller things, some tokens, or a big chunky 5-might minion. Volibear moves in, just gets rid of that or those units, and you start the fight at a massive advantage. And he already has 9 power too, so it's like, what are you going to do against this? Volibear is the premier control unit that they are putting out. I don't think there's that many other units that compare as far as late game heavy payoff, and he's really solid at it. I'm going to give him a 4-star. He will definitely be good in the kind of control decks that he's in. What remains to be seen is whether those decks themselves are viable, right? If you can even survive up to 10 runes in order to even get him on board, or if you're just going to be down 3 or 4 points and you can't recover. So we'll see if those ramp decks are viable, but I like this card a lot. 4 stars. All right, next we're going to talk about spells. So there are 16 spells in the Fury domain. We'll go through them one by one and evaluate them just like we did with the units. Give them a 1 to 5-star rating. Starting with Blind Fury. This is, of course, a Tryndamere spell, although it is not a signature spell for Tryndamere. It's just a spell, so you can play this in decks that don't even have Tryndamere, technically. Blind Fury is a 4-cost spell. You do have to sack 2 runes to play it, and it is an action, so you play it on your turn or in showdowns. Each opponent reveals the top card of their main deck. Choose one and play it, ignoring its cost, then recycle the rest. This I don't know how to evaluate right now, because I'm not sure exactly how it works. I don't know if you're allowed to take cards from your opponent's deck and then play it onto your board and it's now yours. That confuses me at the moment. If it's a spell, obviously there are some spells that you would they would reveal and you'd be like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to cast that spell, and then you trash it and then get rid of it. But if you're getting a big unit, I don't understand if you're able to just take that unit and it becomes yours now. And now you have a unit on your board that is outside of your domain color, you might not be able to interact with it. Like, so there's bounce effects that like put things back into your deck and then into your hand, but you wouldn't be able to play it because maybe it has like a rune cost that doesn't match your domain. So very weird. I have to go into the more detailed rules books to see how this actually works. So impossible for me to evaluate. Could be in crazy good depending on what that text actually means. But for now, I'm going to pass over this one and not give it a rating. So the next spell, though, is pretty easy to evaluate. It's just a 1-cost spell. Cleave. Play on your turn or in showdowns. You give a unit Assault 3 this turn, so +3 might while it's an attacker. This is very reminiscent of all those different assault cards that we've seen, only it's a spell, so it's just like a one-time, one and done, like you throw it on a unit and make them stronger. You're oftentimes casting this to pull one over your opponent, like you move into a battlefield they didn't think you would attack because you're not strong enough, and then you're like, aha, I have Cleave, so I'm actually 3 stronger than you thought I was, and now I'm winning, and you're going to lose your guy unless you do something. So this is just a really good all-around spell to have in your deck to help you like win those close fights. You just pull it out for 1 rune, and it does its job. So I think this is very solid. This card is going to be a 4-star for me. I think you'll find this in most red decks that rely on aggression. Next up, you've got Disintegrate. This is a 4-cost spell, and even though Annie is on this card does belong to the Origin set and not the Proving Grounds. So just interesting tidbit there. You might not have bought Proving Grounds, and yet you'll still have a card that features Annie. It is an action, and it's deal 3 to unit at a battlefield. If this kills it, draw 1. There are tons of examples of this type of effect or mechanic in other card games. Hearthstone has tons of them I know of, where you just get the benefit of drawing a card if this card kills something, right? Really solid. 4 cost to deal 3 might seem like a lot, but the upside of drawing a card is huge. And I think any kind of targeted damage in this first set, like on launch, is going to be really solid because there's not going to be much of it, right? Like I said with board clears, same with like targeted damage effects. Most decks within all the domains will really like having direct damage effects. And so having one that does 3 and then also has potential of drawing a card is really solid. I think this will be played a lot. So I'm going to give this a 4-star as well. Speaking of direct damage, we have Falling Star, 2 cost, and you do have to pay 2 power in order to play this. And you do this twice, you deal 3 to a unit. So you can choose 2 different units, or you can choose the same unit. Really, really good card. You're spending those 2, exhausting those 2 runes, and then putting them back, obviously. So it almost negates your rune gain for that turn. But the flexibility of dealing 3 potentially spread out across multiple units twice is huge. And you'll see from other cards that are available that there are effects like Annie, which allow your effects to deal more damage. And so this would be multiplied twice for this card. You would deal 4 to a unit twice, so it actually does 8 damage total. Crazy math. But that does exist, and we'll see one of these gear cards in a second that does exactly that. So I think this card is really good and can get even better with synergy. So I'm putting this at a 5-star. I think Falling Star will be in basically every red deck because of how good it is. That's my prediction. Firestorm, 6 cost, and you burn 1 rune in order to deal 3 to all enemy units at a battlefield. This is essentially Tibbers without the body, right? You're paying 6 and sacking a rune in order to just wipe the boards. This is obviously very good against token decks and decks that have lots of units at different battlefields, and not quite so good against decks that really just have a couple of big guys, right? If all of your enemies' units are 5 might or over, if they're playing a mighty deck or a ramp deck with Volibear, this doesn't do much, and it's kind of a dead card in your hand, and you'd much rather have something that's more targeted as a spell. So kind of hit or miss on this, but because it has the potential of just winning you the game outright against these aggressive token generation decks that are very low on hand size and just trying to get things out there, I'm going to say that Firestorm is about a 3-star card. It's not insanely good, but it will be very impactful because it is just a decent board clear. We've got Get Excited. This is a 2-cost spell. Discard 1, deal its energy cost as damage to a unit at a battlefield. Ignore its power cost. This is, again, a discard synergy card. does cost a red rune to play, but you're able to kind of choose what it does, right? You can discard an expensive card in order to deal that much damage to something on a battlefield. So I could totally see this being run in decks with big, like high cost cards, and having it as like a backup method of removal, right? Imagine you play this and you discard your extra Volibear that's in your hand because you've already got one out there and you don't need the second one. And then you deal 10 damage to something on board, which will basically cover almost all units that your opponent could have. Even though it seems like a cheap card that'll be played primarily in discard decks, it could be pretty impactful in control decks as well. And you might see this being played in decks with really big minions. So I'm going to give this a 4 stars. I think it finds its way into a variety of decks, and it has a really good effect. Okay, Hextech Ray. 1 cost, and you're sacking 1 rune. Action, play on your turn or in showdowns. Deal 3 to a unit at a battlefield. So this is just a cheaper version almost of Disintegrate, right? Where Disintegrate was deal 3 to a unit at a battlefield and then draw a card potentially. This costs only 1 to deal that same 3 damage. You're not drawing a card, and you do have to recycle that rune, but it's still dealing 3 for only 1 energy, technically, which is very, very good. Notably, this is not Victor's signature spell. Victor's signature spell is, we'll see it later in a future video, but very good removal spell regardless. I think this will, kind of like Disintegrate, I think this will be run in a lot of different decks that are Fury Domain, maybe all of them, because of how flexible it is, and just being able to just quickly laser small things on your enemy's board, or play this to help you start a chain in order to remove some of your enemy's things and help you take over a battlefield. I think that'll be really, really good. So, final rating, I'm going to call this 4 stars. Okay, Icathian Rain. This is Kai'Sa's signature spell. It costs 7, and you do have to get rid of 3 runes in order to cast this. So, very, very expensive spell, but the payoff is incredible. So you're going to do this 6 times, which is just deal 2 to a unit, and you can choose different units. So a total of 12 damage, but has the flexibility of spreading it out to whatever you need it to be spread out to. This is absolutely destructive in certain decks, especially Kai'Sa decks that rely on spells and that can do more damage with spells. If you're running the gear that we're going to see in a second, this does even more damage and helps you really just fully clear the board. This will definitely see play. I think this is a 5-star card. The flexibility that it offers, yes, you're paying a lot of mana for it, but it basically allows you to just clean up whatever you want to on the battlefields and kind of shape the battlefields how you want them to look like. Very impactful. I think this will define the meta. Next we have Incinerate. This is a 2-cost spell, and it's deal 2 to a unit at a battlefield. So kind of like Disintegrate, now we have Incinerate, where it costs half the cost, and you're doing 2 instead of 3. But you're not drawing a card. So just more direct damage. What can I say? This is solid. I'm going to give it a 3-star because I don't think it's quite as good as Disintegrate. I think that extra card draw potential on Disintegrate is very impactful. Just spending just 1 rune for Hextech Ray to deal 3 is also a little bit better. So I'm just going to give this 3 stars. Just a solid removal spell, but it doesn't blow me away like the other 2 did. Okay, Noxian Guillotine. This is a 4-cost and 1 rune spell. It is Darius's signature spell, and you choose a unit and you kill it the next time it takes damage this turn. And then if you play this with Legion, where you're playing it after something else, you kill it now instead. So very flexible. You can play this and then just ping something, right? You say you play Noxian Guillotine, and then you play your Incinerate right after, and then for 6 cost, and just 1 rune recycle, you kill anything, right? Really, really good. And if you've played something else before this, maybe you played Incinerate before this, and then you guillotine it, then you kill it on the guillotine. So either way, that thing is dead for only 6 mana. And maybe you didn't even Incinerate. Maybe you just played a unit, and then you play this. And you put your guy down on your base, and then just get rid of a different unit. So really, really good removal spell. This is 5 stars for sure. Next we have Shakedown. This is another 2-cost spell where you have to pay a rune to play it. And you choose an enemy unit, deal 6 to it, unless its controller has you draw 2. And in that case, you're paying 2 to draw 2. And if not, then you're dealing 6 to their unit, and that'll kill most things. So I think more often than not, your opponent is going to let you draw 2 cards. But sometimes they'll see that you're basically going to beat them on board anyway, and they're like, well, I'll just get rid of my units, and you can't draw cards, and that's fine with me. So either way, it's very, very good. I'm going to give this card a 4-star, being able to have any kind of card draw in these red decks. It's becoming a growing trend that's a very powerful effect. So, very good. All right, Sky Splitter, another expensive one. 8-cost spell, and you have to sack 1 rune. This spell's energy cost is reduced by the highest might among units you control. You deal 5 to a unit at a battlefield. Okay, so it does cost 8 energy, but if you have a powerful unit or a really mighty unit at a battlefield, this doesn't cost as much. And if you have something that costs 8 or more, this is free. You just throw it out there. Sorry, not free. You have to get rid of that 1 rune. You have to recycle it. But if you have something that costs 8 or more, you're just recycling that 1 rune and dealing 5 to a unit, which is really, really good. So this will obviously be played in control decks with the big boy minions, and it will absolutely not be played in any other style of deck. So I'm going to give this a 2-star card. I think it finds its home into only a very specific archetype, like deck archetype, and outside of that archetype, you're not going to see this at all. It's not going to see much play. So because of that, because that archetype is one of the ones that seems to be more weaker at launch, I'm going to give this a 2-star. I don't think it's very good. Okay, now we've got Stormbringer. 6 runes to play this, and you have to recycle 2 of them. You choose a friendly unit in your base, and you deal damage equal to its might to all enemy units at a battlefield, and then you move your unit there. This is obviously crazy good, especially if you have a mighty unit in your base. If that mighty unit is Volibear, even crazier, because then you're taking his 9 power, and you're saying, okay, I'm going to deal 9 damage to everything at this battlefield. So even if something survives, then my Volibear goes in and deals 5 damage preemptively and then attacks. So it's just a super, super strong spell that is a board clear as well, and it only costs 6. But it only works if you have a very mighty unit, right, that's already in your base. So similar to Sky Splitter, this only finds a home in a certain deck archetype. But because of how good the eventual effect is, it's not just dealing 5, it's clearing out a whole battlefield. I'm going to give this a 3-star instead of a 2-star. I think it's better than Sky Splitter by a large margin, but still not super good as to find its way into a bunch of different decks. Okay, 3 more spells here, then we move into gear. We have Super Mega Death Rocket. This is Jinx's signature spell. It costs 4, and you're recycling 1 rune of any color, red or purple. And you're going to deal 5 to a unit. When you conquer, you may discard 1 to return this from your trash to your hand. So what this does is it recycles itself. You get to throw this out there, deal 5 to something, goes into your trash, and then later on, if you want it back, all you have to do is discard a card after you conquer something, and you just get this back, and you can cast it again. So I think that effect is really strong. From what I've seen in this game, you don't really draw through your whole deck. It's hard to get through a big proportion of your deck, especially with the limited card draw. So being able to get back to your hand a spell that does direct damage to a unit is really, really solid. So I think this will definitely be played in aggressive decks. Obviously, it'll be in every Jinx deck. Really good card. I want to put this at 4 stars. I don't think it's quite at that 5-star level yet, but really, really good all the same. Thermo Beam. This is a 5-cost spell, and you have to get rid of 2 runes to play it. And it says kill all gear. Similar to the Saboteur card, the unit that we saw before, where it prevented hidden cards from being revealed. This card strikes me as one that is meant to counter a specific meta, and that meta is gear meta, where you're like getting all these different gadgets out there, and you're constantly tabbing them and using their abilities every turn. So they're preemptively printing this and saying, you know what, we've got a spell out there that when it's played, it gets rid of all gear. And so you can't play like a gear-heavy deck only, or this will be your downfall, right? Which is good. Outside of that, it stinks, right? Because let's say your opponent doesn't play gear, and now you just have a 5-cost card in your hand that does nothing, right? Very, very niche. I would say that gear isn't prevalent enough, isn't good enough in the launch meta in this first set to warrant running Thermo Beam at all. So I'm going to say right now this is a 1-star card, but with a caveat that, you know, as more sets get printed, as better cards come out and there's gear in those cards, this might see more and more play as a counter to those deck archetypes. So for the time being, 1 star. And lastly, we have Void Seeker, a 3-cost spell that recycles a rune. You deal 4 to a unit at a battlefield and then draw 1. And it is action, so you play it on your turn or in showdowns. What does this remind you of? It looks just like Disintegrate, right? The difference is that Disintegrate has to kill a unit to draw 1, and this one doesn't. You're just dealing 4 and then drawing 1. What's the trade-off? Well, you're paying a rune, but it costs less. This only costs 3. It doesn't cost the 4. So even though you're getting rid of 1 rune, you only had to spend 3 on it. So I'd say that kind of evens out. I mean, paying the power can be worse in some situations, but sometimes you really just want to get this out earlier, right? So being able to deal more damage and guaranteed draw for less mana, I'm saying this is a 5-star card. This is just a very solid removal spell. Most red decks are going to run this. And again, this spell only gets better with certain cards that amplify your damage. So 5 stars for sure on Void Seeker. Let's move right in to our last 2 categories of cards. I know this video has already gone pretty long, so I'm trying to finish this up as quick as possible so I'm not keeping people around for too long and boring them. So we've got gear. We've got 5 pieces of gear here, and the first one is Iron Ballista. This enters exhausted. It costs 3. You can tap it to deal 2 to a unit at a battlefield. Most gear, when you put them into the battlefield, they're not exhausted. So this is the exception. You're paying 3. It's just kind of there as almost like a unit, but it's not a unit. It's just something that you can cast every turn. And you exhaust it to deal 2. And it's consistent, so it just kind of stays there and just keeps shooting your opponent every turn and eliminating their units. So really strong. I think this is a 4-star card. It's a really good removal solution, and if you're able to draw it early, it's very solid for just like continuously making your opponent's life difficult. Cards like this, if more of them are printed, will be the reason that Thermo Beam sees play. But for the time being, I think it's just solid. I'm going to give it a 4-star and move on to the next one. This is the gear I was talking about for all those damage dealing spells. So Ravenborn Tome costs 3 to play. When you exhaust it, the next spell you play deals 1 bonus damage, but it's each instance of damage the spell deals that is increased by 1. So if you have a spell that is pinging things multiple times for small amounts, every single one of those pings does 1 extra damage. So Icathian Rain is now doing, instead of 12 damage with 2 damage increments split amongst enemies, it is now 18 damage, because every one of those instances is now 3 instead of 2. That is huge. I can see this being played in basically every spell-heavy Kaisa deck. You're going to want 3 copies of this. You're going to want to find this early and get it out there so that your spells are just always doing more damage. This improves Disintegrate so that you can draw more. It improves Void Seeker to 5 damage for a cost of 3. Just super good all around. And I think this will be played in a lot of different decks. I'm going to give this 5 stars. Really, really cool card. Okay, Sun Disk. Sun Disk is a 2-cost gear with Legion. The next unit you play this turn enters ready. Really awesome card because now especially if you're playing an aggressive deck, you're just playing units out and you can, every turn one of those units can be ready and they can immediately go and attack. So it's kind of more of geared towards an aggressive strategy, but you could also see this fitting into a control strategy, right? Like you have your gear out there, you've got your Sun Discs and you tap it, and you get your Volibear out, right, for 10, and all of a sudden you've got a Volibear that can attack immediately. Granted, you have to have played something right before Volibear, which might be hard to do, but for some of those middle-of-the-road minions, maybe 5 or 6 strength, 5 or 6 might, you're probably going to be fine playing something before them and then getting those out there and having them attack immediately. So I think Sun Disk is a solid card. I'm going to put it at 3 stars. I think it definitely will see play. Unlicensed Armory for 2 cost. You're discarding a card and then exhausting this. And then you choose a friendly unit, and the next time it dies this turn, you may pay a rune to recall it exhausted instead, which means you send it to base. It's not a move. It's not considered a move. You're just bringing it back to your base, and it doesn't die. Really interesting card. It works well in those discard decks that we've discussed. This is the final card here that has some sort of discard synergy, right? And it's death preventing. So when your units die, they just kind of go back to your base, and then they can attack next turn again. They'll just keep going back. So I think this is very solid. It's definitely going to find a room in those discard decks. I don't know if this would fit into many other archetypes, because I'm not sure you want to be discarding your cards just to prevent your small guys from dying. Hard to evaluate. I'm going to say it's 3 stars for now, tentatively. I could see it potentially being better. I could also see it being worse, as it comes out that people don't want to play discard decks. So for now, we're going to call it 3 and move on to the last piece of gear, which is Seal of Rage. Every domain, notably, has a seal of that color, and they all do the same thing. They all cost 0, cost 1 rune that has to be recycled in order to play it, and then as a reaction, you can exhaust it to add 1 rune. And abilities that add resources can't be reacted to, so your opponents can't react to this, like adding a rune. What this does is essentially just make all your cards that cost a rune recycle 1 rune recycle cheaper. And within the Fury domain, as we've seen, there are a lot of those cards, and not a lot of them that have more than 1 rune that needs to be thrown away in order to be played. So I think Seal of Rage is pretty solid. It's going to make all those cards cost just their energy cost and not the rune recycle, and prevent you from falling too far behind in resources. I think Seal of Rage will find its way into a variety of different decks, both mid-range and control, potentially even the aggressive decks, although I don't think they care as much about the rune costs of cards. So we'll have to see, but really, really good card. This is at least a 4-star. All of the seals are basically going to be really good, given the way that resource works and how, again, resource cheating is pretty much always good in card games. Okay, and finally, we're going to get into the legends. So again, there are 5 legends that you can play, 4 that come in the Origins set, and then 1, Annie, that comes in the Proving Grounds, that have a red color on them. So Annie is red and purple, similar to Jinx. She is Fury and Chaos, and her effect says at the end of your turn, ready 2 runes. So just a very passive effect. You're always able to kind of ready 2 of those runes that you spent during your turn. Just all-around solid effect to have, and I can see why they include her in Proving Grounds. It's just a very beginner-friendly way to help people kind of learn the game and benefit from refreshing their resources every turn, right? So very simple passive effect. I like Annie a lot. I think this is a 3-star card. All right, next we have Darius. Darius is the red and yellow legend, or Fury in Order, and his ability says, exhaust this, reaction and Legion, add 1 energy. Abilities that add resources can't be reacted to get the effect if you've played a card this turn. So essentially you have to play a card and then you exhaust this guy, and then you can add a single cost, a single energy, and discount something. So another example of being able to chain out runes, being able to play things for cheaper. I think this is a solid effect. I don't think it's as good as some of the other effects that we're going to see here in a bit, but it'll find its way into certain deck archetypes for sure. So I'm going to tentatively rate Darius as a 2-star legend. I don't think he's that insane, but I think he'll see play for sure. And I think there actually was one deck recently, one tournament on entry, who did really well with Darius. So I know Darius can be good, but he's kind of an underdog legend at the moment, where he's not super popular or super strong in this meta, but he can be good in the right scenarios. So Darius as 2 stars. Next we have Jinx. Jinx is a fan favorite, right? Made ever so more popular by Arcane. And she is red and purple, Fury and Chaos. And her text reads, at start of your beginning phase, draw 1 if you have 1 or fewer cards in your hand. So this is where we see all of those discard cards, right, come together. Jinx is the stereotypical aggressive style of deck. You can only take advantage of this effect if your hand only has 1 card or if your hand is empty, right? So Jinx really wants to be emptying her hand all the time so that she can consistently draw extra cards and then play those cards and then draw more on her next turn and then play them and then draw and then play. So basically just like firing off your cards in small bursts, right? I love the flavor of this card. It's very in line with the character. It's very chaotic. It's very risky. but in the right style of deck, it's just going to overwhelm your opponents, and it's going to be very hard to fight against. So I'm going to give Jinx a 4-star. I think she's definitely going to be played. Any kind of card game player who wants to play the aggressive deck is going to be playing Jinx at some point. So yeah, really cool card. Next up is Kai'Sa. This is Kai'Sa, Daughter of the Void, Fury and Mind legend, and her ability is a reaction. She adds a single rune, and you can only use that to play spells. So she essentially makes all of your spells 1 rune cheaper, and that rune means like the recycling of the rune, not the cost itself. So all your expensive rune recycle costing spells aren't as expensive anymore. I think this effect is extremely, extremely powerful because, as we saw, so many of those spells only cost 1 rune in order to play them. And so now you're casting them for just their energy cost and not having to sacrifice your runes. And so you can retain the amount of resource you have in front of you throughout the course of the game. And some of those spells are really, really good. We've seen Disintegrate, Icathian Rain, Hextech Ray, and that's just the Fury ones. We haven't even gotten into the Mind Domain spells. So for that reason, I think Kai'Sa is extremely, extremely powerful. She's definitely a 5-star legend, and it's not just me who thinks so. If you look at some of these preliminary tournaments that are happening, you'll see that Kai'Sa is kind of dominating the early, pre-launch meta right now. She's doing extremely well in some of those tournaments. She makes up about, in some of them, 20% of the decks that are being played. So people love Kai'Sa and love this ability. She seems very fun to play, and I can't wait to try to play her decks myself. So 5 stars for Kai'Sa. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Volibear. This is the Fury and Body legend. And he says, when you play a mighty unit, you may exhaust me to channel 1 rune exhausted. A unit, again, is mighty, while it has 5+ might. So Volibear is the legend for you if you want to play ramp. If you want to play big monsters, big things, you want to get tons of mana, scale up your resources, and then just overpower your opponent with big things. I think Volibear will be super fun to play. Again, I love control-style decks. It's the thing that I loved playing most in Hearthstone. So I can't wait to play Volibear in Riftbound. This is going to be such a fun deck to play. Whether it's meta viable and whether it can actually, survive the early turns against some of these more aggressive strategies kind of remains to be seen, but I still can't wait to try it out. I'm going to give him a 3-star for now, but I can totally see him being much stronger as certain other sets are printed, as better mighty units come out. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, tentatively, we're giving him a 3-star review. That's it for this video. If you made it this far, thanks for staying with me to the end. I know this went pretty long, but I really wanted to give each card not just a rating, but also a rationale for that rating. Once again, these ratings were all just my opinions and speculation, and I'm sure I'll be wrong on some of them, probably many of them. If you agreed or disagreed with my takes on any of these cards, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know which cards you guys think are standouts in this set. My plan is to make a video like this for each of the 6 different domains, so let me know in the comments what kind of Riftbound videos you all would like to see when those are finished. Thanks again. See you next time.